Awareness before escape means understanding that no meaningful change can happen until you see your inner position with clarity and honesty. Most people want relief first and understanding later. They want to escape discomfort without fully recognizing what they are escaping from. This creates a cycle where the same mental states repeat in different forms. Awareness breaks this cycle by turning unconscious reactions into conscious observations. When a difficult emotional state arises, such as fear, regret, anger, or confusion, the instinct is to distract, suppress, or immediately fix it. But avoidance does not remove the state, it only pushes it deeper. What is ignored does not disappear, it waits. Awareness means pausing long enough to recognize what is actually happening inside you, without judgment and without urgency to change it right away. This pause is not weakness, it is control. To observe honestly, you must separate yourself from the state you are experiencing. Many people say, I am angry or I am broken, but this language creates identification. Awareness changes the language internally too. Anger is present, heaviness is present, confusion is present. This subtle shift is powerful. The moment you stop identifying with the state, you stop being trapped inside it. You become the observer rather than the prisoner. Growth requires this distance. If you are fully merged with a mental state, you cannot leave it because you do not see an exit. Awareness creates space, and space creates options. This is why awareness comes before escape. You cannot walk out of a room if you do not first realize you are inside one. Honest observation also means resisting the urge to create stories. The mind loves explanations, blame, and justification. It wants to label experiences as good or bad, deserved or undeserved. Awareness does not engage in this. It simply notices what thoughts are repeating, what sensations are present in the body, where is tension held. When you stay with direct experience instead of interpretation, clarity increases naturally. Many people fear awareness because they think it will be painful. In reality, what hurts most is resistance. The moment you allow yourself to see clearly, the intensity often decreases. This is because awareness removes confusion. Confusion amplifies suffering, clarity reduces it. Even when the situation itself is difficult, clarity makes it workable. Awareness also exposes patterns. Without awareness, every emotional reaction feels new and overwhelming. With awareness, you begin to notice repetition, the same trigger, the same thought loop, the same bodily response. When you see a pattern clearly, it loses authority. You realize this is not who you are, it is something that happens under certain conditions. This realization is the beginning of freedom. Another important aspect of awareness is responsibility without self-attack. Honest observation does not mean criticizing yourself for being in a certain state. Judgment clouds perception. If every observation is followed by blame, the mind will avoid looking. Awareness must be neutral and precise, like a scientist observing data. Only then can learning occur. You cannot escape a mental state through force. Forcing change creates internal conflict, and conflict strengthens the state you are trying to leave. Awareness works differently. It dissolves states by understanding them fully. When something is fully understood, it no longer needs to repeat itself to be seen. This principle applies not only to emotions but also to habits, behaviors, and identities. People often say they want to get out of a situation, out of procrastination, out of self-doubt, out of unhealthy patterns. But they rarely study these states closely. They only label them as problems. Awareness requires studying your own mind with patience. When does the habit begin? What thoughts precede it? What need is it trying to meet? Without this understanding, attempts to escape will be temporary. Awareness is also grounded in a present moment. Most mental suffering exists in memory or anticipation. The body may be safe, but the mind is elsewhere. Awareness brings attention back to what is actually happening now. When attention is stable in the present, many imagined threats lose their power. This is not denial of reality, it is accurate perception of it. To cultivate awareness, you must slow down. Speed hides truth. When life is rushed, reactions dominate. Slowing down allows observation. This can be as simple as noticing your breath, your posture, or the tone of your thoughts. Small moments of awareness practiced consistently retrain the mind to see clearly. Awareness before escape also teaches patience. Some states do not disappear immediately once observed. This is where many people fail. They observe briefly, do not get instant relief, and return to avoidance. True awareness stays present without demanding immediate results. Over time, this steady presence weakens the grip of old patterns. Importantly, awareness reveals that not every discomfort needs to be escaped. Some discomfort is a signal for growth. When you are aware, you can distinguish between pain that needs healing and discomfort that comes from expansion. Without awareness, all discomfort feels threatening, and you try to escape everything, losing valuable opportunities to grow. Finally, awareness restores choice. When you are unaware, you react automatically. When you are aware, you respond deliberately. This is the difference between being driven by your past and shaping your future. Escape without awareness is temporary relief. Awareness before escape is transformation. Growth begins not when life becomes easier, but when perception becomes clearer. See where you are before trying to leave. Only then will the exit reveal itself. Responsibility without self-punishment begins with understanding what responsibility actually means. Many people confuse it with blame. They believe that to be responsible, they must suffer internally, replay their mistakes, and carry a constant sense of guilt. This is not responsibility. This is attachment to the past disguised as morality. True responsibility is practical, calm, and directed toward correction, not self-destruction. When you look at a past action honestly, the first step is to acknowledge it without emotional exaggeration. Something happened. You made a choice. That choice had consequences. This statement does not require anger toward yourself, nor does it require excuses. It requires clarity. Emotional self-attack clouds clarity. When the mind is busy punishing itself, it cannot learn effectively. Learning requires a stable inner state. Self-punishment often comes from the belief that suffering proves sincerity. People think, if I hurt enough about this, it shows I care. But pain does not equal care. Care is shown through changed behavior. If the same mistake continues while guilt increases, responsibility is not being practiced. It is being avoided. Responsibility asks one question only: what must be done differently now? A calm mind can answer that question. An agitated mind cannot. This is why responsibility must be separated from emotional violence against oneself. When you attack yourself internally, you create fear. Fear narrows perception and pushes the mind into defense. In defense, people justify, deny, or repeat patterns unconsciously. Calm responsibility keeps perception wide and honest. Taking responsibility also means refusing to identify with the mistake. You did something wrong, unskillful, or immature, but that action is not your identity. When people say, I am a failure, growth stops. When they say, I fail in this situation, growth becomes possible. Language matters because it shapes perception. Responsibility deals with actions. Self-punishment turns actions into identities. True responsibility is forward-looking. The past is used as information, not as a prison. Once the lesson is extracted, there is no further use in emotional repetition. Replaying the mistake without applying the lesson is wasteful. It drains energy that should be invested in improvement. Responsibility conserves energy for action. Another important aspect is precision. Vague guilt helps no one. Saying I am a bad person is not responsibility, it is emotional fog. Responsibility is specific. What exactly was wrong? Was it a lack of discipline, awareness, boundaries, or courage? Precision transforms guilt into guidance. Without precision, the mind remains confused and stuck. Self-punishment often feels familiar because it creates the illusion of control. By attacking yourself, you feel like you are doing something about the mistake. In reality, you are avoiding the discomfort of change. Change requires effort, humility, and consistency. Self-punishment requires none of these. It only requires memory. Responsibility demands action. There is also an element of courage in taking responsibility without hatred. It takes strength to face what you did without collapsing emotionally. Weakness hides in extremes, either denying fault or drowning in guilt. Strength stands in the middle, clear acknowledgement, steady resolve, and disciplined correction. Responsibility also includes repairing where possible. If harm was done, responsibility asks how it can be reduced, or corrected now. Sometimes repair is external, sometimes internal. But repair must be grounded in action, not self-flagellation. Apologies without behavioral change are empty. Guilt without correction is indulgent. Many people fear letting go of self-punishment because they think it will make them careless or arrogant. The opposite is true. When the mind is calm, attention improves. When attention improves, behavior improves. Self-hatred weakens discipline, self-respect strengthens it. Responsibility grows best in an environment of inner respect. It is also important to understand timing. Responsibility happens in the present. The mistake exists in the past, but responsibility is applied now. Each moment you choose not to repeat the old pattern, you are taking responsibility. This means responsibility is not a one-time act, but a continuous practice. Over time, responsibility without self-punishment builds trust in yourself. You begin to see that when you make a mistake, you do not collapse, you correct. This trust reduces fear of failure, and reduced fear leads to more honest effort. People who punish themselves severely often avoid growth because they are afraid of the pain of making another mistake. Responsibility frees you from this fear. Finally, responsibility without self-punishment aligns you with reality. Reality does not insult you, it gives feedback. When you learn to receive feedback without emotional distortion, life becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. Mistakes become instructions, failures become adjustments, progress becomes steady. Taking responsibility does not mean carrying weight forever. It means carrying awareness just long enough to change direction. Once direction is changed, the weight is no longer needed. This is maturity, this is strength. Forgiveness as a discipline begins with rejecting the common belief that forgiveness is something you feel once and then move on. Feelings are unstable. They rise and fall depending on mood, memory, and circumstance. If forgiveness depends on emotion, it will disappear the moment the mind revisits the past. Discipline, however, is stable. It is something you practice regardless of how you feel. This is why self-forgiveness must be trained, not waited for. Most people carry mental weight far longer than it is useful. At first, reflecting on past mistakes can be educational. It helps identify what went wrong and what must change. But after the lesson is clear, continued mental replay serves no purpose. At that point, repetition is no longer learning, it is punishment. Forgiveness as a discipline is the skill of knowing when reflection has ended and release must begin. The mind resists this release because holding on to guilt creates a false sense of responsibility. People think, if I let this go, I might forget the lesson. This fear is misplaced. Lessons are integrated through behavior, not emotional pain. When a lesson is embodied in how you act, speak, and decide, it does not disappear just because the emotion fades. In fact, excessive emotional weight often interferes with applying the lesson clearly. Practicing forgiveness means recognizing when the past is being used as information and when it is being used as a weapon. The moment it becomes a weapon against your present self, it must be put down. Discipline is required here because the mind will return to familiar patterns automatically. Forgiveness does not happen once, it happens every time the mind brings the old accusation, and you choose not to engage with it. This practice begins with awareness of repetition. Notice how often the same memory appears. Notice the tone of the inner voice. Is it constructive or destructive? Forgiveness does not argue with the voice or try to silence it aggressively. It redirects attention. It returns to the present task, the present value, the present responsibility. Over time, the mind learns that the old story no longer receives energy. Forgiving yourself also means accepting that growth includes error. Many people secretly believe they should have known better at every stage of life. This belief ignores reality. Understanding develops over time. Awareness deepens through experience. Expecting past behavior to reflect present understanding is unrealistic and unfair. Forgiveness as a discipline acknowledges this without excusing harmful actions. It says, I acted with the awareness I had then, and now I act with the awareness I have now. Discipline is especially important because self-forgiveness often feels uncomfortable at first. Guilt feels familiar. Letting go can feel like losing structure. Some people identify so strongly with their past mistakes that releasing them creates a temporary sense of emptiness. Discipline carries you through this phase. It reminds you that unfamiliar does not mean wrong. It means new. Another key aspect is consistency. Forgiveness practiced occasionally is weak. Forgiveness practiced daily reshapes the mind. This does not require long rituals or dramatic affirmations. It requires simple, repeated actions, refusing to replay old scenes, choosing constructive behavior, and returning attention to what is within your control now. These small acts compound over time. Forgiveness as a discipline is also deeply connected to self-respect. When you continuously punish yourself, you communicate to your mind that you are not worth improving, only judging. This weakens motivation and discipline in other areas of life. When you forgive yourself through action, you reinforce the idea that you are worth effort, training, and care. This strengthens discipline across the board. It is important to understand that forgiveness does not erase consequences. Some consequences remain, and discipline includes accepting them without resentment. Forgiveness simply removes unnecessary suffering layered on top of those consequences. You deal with reality as it is, not as you wish it had been. This clarity allows you to move forward with strength rather than bitterness. Daily forgiveness also prevents emotional accumulation. When small mistakes are forgiven promptly and correctly, they do not pile up into overwhelming shame. Discipline keeps the mental environment clean. Just as physical discipline maintains the body, mental discipline maintains clarity. Without it, the mind becomes cluttered with unresolved emotional debris. Forgiveness as a discipline trains humility. It reminds you that you are a work in progress. You will continue to make errors, adjust, and refine. When forgiveness is practiced correctly, mistakes no longer threaten your identity. They become feedback. Feedback is useful. Threats are paralyzing. Over time, this discipline changes how you relate to others as well. When you learn to forgive yourself without indulgence or cruelty, you naturally extend the same balance outward. You become less reactive, less judgmental, and more precise in how you deal with people. This is not softness, it is maturity. Ultimately, forgiving yourself is an act of alignment with reality. Reality moves forward. Time does not go backward. Holding on to mental weight that no longer teaches you anything is resistance to life itself. Discipline teaches you when to hold on and when to release. Forgiveness is the release that allows learning to become wisdom instead of burden. Forgiveness as a discipline is not about feeling better in the moment. It is about living better over time. When practiced daily, it frees energy, sharpens awareness, and restores direction. What no longer serves growth must be put down, not once, but again and again, until the habit of release becomes stronger than the habit of regret. Leaving the old pattern through action means recognizing that understanding, no matter how deep or accurate, does not automatically change behavior. Many people accumulate insight. They read, listen, reflect, and agree with what is true, yet their daily life remains the same. This is because insight lives in the mind, while patterns live in the body, habits, and nervous system. To leave an old pattern, understanding must be translated into action repeatedly until it becomes embodied. An old pattern is not just a thought, it is a conditioned response. It appears automatically under certain conditions. When stress arises, the same reaction appears. When pressure increases, the same behavior returns. This happens not because of lack of intelligence, but because the body has been trained through repetition. You cannot think your way out of a conditioned pattern. You must act your way out. Action creates new feedback. Each time you respond differently, even in a small way, you interrupt the old loop. At first, this interruption feels uncomfortable. The body prefers what is familiar, even if it is harmful. This discomfort is not a sign of failure, it is evidence that change is occurring. If change felt comfortable immediately, it would not be change, it would be continuation. Consistent action is more important than dramatic action. People often wait for motivation, confidence, or perfect conditions before acting. Old patterns thrive in this waiting. Action must be taken before readiness is felt. Readiness is created through action, not before it. Each small, correct action weakens the old pattern and strengthens a new one. Embodied action means the change is visible in behavior, posture, speech, and daily choices. It is not enough to say, I understand I should be more disciplined. Discipline must show up in how you wake up, how you use your time, how you respond when resistance appears. The body learns through doing, not through agreement. When insight is not followed by action, it often turns into self-criticism. You know what you should do, but you do not do it. This gap creates frustration and shame. Action closes the gap. Even imperfect action restores alignment. One correct step taken today is more powerful than perfect understanding postponed indefinitely. Leaving an old pattern also requires planning for resistance. Resistance will appear. The mind will argue, delay, and negotiate. This is not personal. It is the pattern defending itself. Action-based transformation anticipates this and prepares structure in advance. Routines, environments, and boundaries reduce reliance on willpower. Willpower is limited, structure is reliable. Another critical element is repetition under pressure. Changing behavior when life is calm is easy. Patterns reveal their strength under stress. Transformation requires practicing new responses precisely when the old pattern is triggered. This is why awareness and action must work together. Awareness notices the trigger, action responds differently. Without this pairing, insight remains theoretical. Leaving the old pattern also means accepting temporary inefficiency. New behaviors feel awkward. You may respond slower, less smoothly, or less confidently at first. This is normal. Mastery always looks clumsy in the beginning. If you demand elegance immediately, you will retreat to the old pattern because it feels more competent. Discipline accepts early discomfort as part of training. Action transforms identity. When you act differently repeatedly, your self-image adjusts naturally. You no longer need to convince yourself you have changed. Evidence accumulates. Confidence built on action is stable because it is rooted in experience, not hope. It is also important to measure progress correctly. Progress is not the absence of the old pattern, but the speed of recovery. How quickly do you notice the pattern when it appears? How quickly do you correct course? Each quicker correction is a victory. Waiting for perfection keeps you stuck. Training responsiveness moves you forward. Leaving old patterns through action also requires closing escape routes. Many people keep old habits available just in case. This weakens commitment. Action becomes powerful when alternatives are removed. This does not require extreme measures, but it does require honesty. If you want a new outcome, you must reduce access to the old behavior. Action-based change builds trust with yourself. Each time you follow through, even in small ways, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on your own decisions. This trust reduces internal conflict and increases clarity. People who act consistently do not need constant motivation, their momentum carries them. Importantly, action is not about aggression or forcing, it is about direction. Calm, repeated actions, aligned with understanding, reshape the nervous system over time. The body learns that the new response is safe, effective, and sustainable. Eventually, what once required effort becomes natural. Insight shows you the door. Action is what walks you through it. Without action, insight becomes another form of comfort, another way to feel prepared without being changed. Transformation demands participation. When understanding is honored through consistent, embodied action, the old pattern loses its grip, not because it was fought, but because it was replaced.